Hi all, this is Saturday, April. I don't even remember the date. I think today's the 5th, and I thought I'd continue my recent spree of doing generator videos. I'm sorry, human design videos. And I found myself doing the basics again, and I think that's great, especially for newbies on my channel. And today I thought I'd do a rundown on the types. I did something fun. I went and looked for some of the designs of my favorite musicians who I've actually met all in person, except for Anik. Um, and we'll get to her chart. She's a singer for the band called The Gathering. No longer, but she was a singer of the band for like 20, 30 years. And it's a band from the Netherlands. But I'll get to that chart later. I'm going to start with the chart of the great Bobby Liebling. This is the singer of Pentagram. And he has a chart. I don't have exact times for anyone, just a update on that. So it's kind of speculative. I gave everybody around noon. And but Bobby's a fun one because whether you're a fan of metal or rock or some of the bands I have, these are interesting examples. So Bobby was born in 53 on December 21st. So he's born on the winter solstice. And if you look over here, we can figure out his human design. Well, it obviously says, but here's how we figure it out. We look first to see if this center in the middle is colored in or not. And if it's colored in, we call that definition. And so any human design type with that center colored in is known as a generator. If they have the throat center colored in as well, then they're known as a manifesting generator. Their personal authority will be relative to some of these centers here, whether they have the emotional solar plexus defined, and if not, then it's sacral authority. So it's pretty simple with the generators. Now, one thing about generators is once they commit to something in life, that's it. Come hell or high water, they're in. They're in it. And they're in it till it's done, whenever that is. And in the case of Bobby, he just right out of high, even during high school, I think he was in bands. And I think sometime after, not too long after they started the band Pentagram in the 70s. But there was only ever rehearsal tracks and recordings. They never released their first album till the 80s. And they recently just released a new album. And it's fascinating because here you have a singer who his whole life uh, pretty much headed one band. And it's been this way his whole life. He's struggled with some drug addiction, some heroin addiction, but great singer. He calls himself a hard rock, heavy rock singer, but many categorize him these days as doom because he kind of carries the intensity of Ozzy forth that influenced the drone vocals, the intense stage presence, the songs that border on just, extreme doomy riffage, slow and sometimes fast and but more often than not it's just like really good dirty rock and roll. And what's real interesting about him is that as a generator he committed to pentagram very early and he stuck through. So it's just kind of fun to see this in a chart. And the guy has a colored history. I mean, definitely a dark side. There's some shady shit he definitely did. You can watch that in the documentary. I'm not going to go over that. And that's all his business. We don't he and if it was, he paid for it. I'm pretty sure he went to jail for what he did, which is not something I'm going to repeat here and not something, really good or laudatory at all. Um, Howard, on the part of his own personal redemption, we have him here as a vessel of love, here to share his love or hate with others. And definitely a singer with stage presence, definitely makes a difference. Very powerful. I saw them earlier this year. It was a great show. And that's my example for the generators. And generators often than not, are the types that I don't think I'll go too much into detail actually today. I'll do a more raw kind of talk on each type another time. I think I'm just going to give the basics so that you guys can see what type is what. So I'm gonna move on to another musician here. I think I'm going to go right to a manifesting generator chart. Something's going on with my screen. This is just some Mercury retrograde here. Okay, so this next chart is the chart of a manifesting generator. I did the chart of Glenn Danzig, famous hard rock singer, famous lead singer for the Misfits. Pretty much they got popular in Metallica wearing their t-shirts in the early 80s. But not without, reason. Very creative band. It was like horror punk. And then later they became the hard rock metal band Danzig. And so here's another vessel, this time on summer solstice. So we have Glenn Danzig for the 23rd of June, 1955. I have him down. Again, we don't have exact time, but we know he's a manifesting generator because we see the defined sacral and then defined throat center. And so we know right away that's a manifesting generator. Um, we have him as a pure manifesting generator, no definition on the emotional side or the spleen. And let me see if I can see anything else. Similar to Bobby, Danzig committed pretty young to being a musician, to being a singer, and he stuck with it throughout the years. And I just saw him live like a couple weeks ago. So another musician I picked who I've seen, and I got to meet him. He's done comic books. When I was younger, I got to meet him at a comic book convention, and that was great. Got to shake his hand, just as I got to do with Bobby. I also met Bobby and got to shake his hand too. That was great. And so Danzig has a very dark mystique, but it's hilarious because like he's vessel of love, So he has a loving nature. Like it's evident. But yet he can get away with his like tongue in cheek kind of, horror, uh, you know, thematic or the way he carries, the theme, his albums, lyrics, gets away with it. He's vessel of love too. I don't know what that one is. I think I'm three, and I forgot to check Bobby's. But you can another interesting thing is that for the right angle cross destinies, they're always a combination of the sun and earth on both sides. That's why anyone born on solstice or equinox is going to be a vessel of love hate because they're going to have the same gates just in reverse on either side, depending on whether it's solstice or not. It's interesting that Glenn's actually been able to hold a group together with his 10-3. Usually that puts noses out of joint and makes groups hard because he's kind of like the anarchist of a group. Good thing he's the leader. That's the way he stabilizes it. And he also has the 21-45, just like Bobby does. It's real interesting because it's almost like they're leaders, of their craft in that sense. And it is a channel of leadership. So that's really cool. Let me see how many overlays he has. Three, four, five. Five overlays. This is very aware person. So this is an MG chart. And MG is just like generators still. Usually it's about the life's about the day to day, the steady and the truth, the capacity to also have a lot of energy to work really hard at their craft and to perfect it. And you have that with generators and both manifesting generators. And that's what it is. I'm going to go on now to my projector example. Okay, so now I'm going to share the chart of a projector. This is Trey Azagthoth of Morbid Angel. This is his chart. Again, I don't have the time. I've seen him many times in concert. I got to take a picture with him back in the 90s at a show. It was awesome. And I still have that picture somewhere. And he's a splenic projector. And most likely, again, I don't have exact time, but it seems to me he's a projector. It just makes total sense. Now, Trey never was really one for the limelight, at least not in a direct way. He kind of left the talk and, the presence of the band, the leadership of the band up to the singers. And David Vincent was the original singer for a while. I haven't checked him, but I assume he's a generator. But Trey was always happy to just play his guitar, and he's something of a mad genius. I mean, the way he plays, um, just just really eccentric, really strange, kind of in the style of early Kerry King, very a lot of noodling on the guitar, but at the same time just really weird and dissonant and fun. Just nothing like his guitar playing in all of death metal. I mean, the only guitarist who was maybe close to his level of skill and was a guitarist who played with him, and that's Eric Rutan of Hate Eternal. But Eric is currently in Cannibal Corpse. But yeah, just looking at Trey's chart, it's just so cool because, with projectors, you have less of a day to day. You have less energy. Projectors have less energy, but once they're invited into something, it can really shine. And, Trey had a real talent. I mean, I think it's Aries Snake. So not much of a frontman necessarily, but a real like creative, interesting guy. I mean, all his interests were pretty wild and wacky. And they had this album called Formulas Fatal to the Flesh. And just the lyrics on that, the creativity. They even had like Sumerian transliteration as the lyrics for a couple of their songs. Like just really creative stuff, really fun and really deep too. Very almost like Taoist influences on that album. Very philosophical lyrics, including gateways as well. Early on, it was just straight satanic, but I think also on Domination, David Vincent wrote most of that, and it was more like Roman war strategy and interesting historical anecdotes. That's an amazing album. So you see, he's a projector because you see that the sacral center is open. And so right then it's either a reflector, manifestor, or projector. But in this case, it's a projector because there's no channel that goes from a motor to the throat. You have throat definition, but that would be a mental projector, throat definition. For a manifestor, you would need one of these two centers, the spleen or the emotional solar plexus, to go straight up to the throat. Or it could be the motor of the ego to the throat, and that would make a manifestor. But in this case, open sacral, we have a projector. And Trey, over the years, Morbid Angels had lineup changes, and they changed singers a couple times. But recently Steve came back, Steve Tucker, who was the singer that took over during Formulas, and he's had some recent struggles with his health, some evidence that he wasn't taking care of himself, back issues. Um, but yeah, this is a guy who's gonna, need to take care of himself as a projector. He's gonna need to get his rest. And but such a virtuoso. I mean, this you could tell like Eric in contrast is obviously a generator, it's so clear. And they both played together on Domination. But you could tell that like Trey just spent hours on his own just perfecting the instrument in his own way, in such a unique way, in such a creative way. And his playing has something of like the eternal youth archetype. And I'll explain it in this way. Projectors are like children. They're like eternal children. They live in a world of wonder because they're always excited about life and what it's offering, and they love to see and experience, which is very different from the generators who like to be busy with, their focus, what they do. But there's just something about the eternal child with projectors. It's like they're like grown children. And I say this for fun. I don't say this, to be derogatory towards them at all because this is their nature to be in wonder of the world and to experience it fully. And so they're not so day to day as the generator types are. And so they may not be so involved in, day to day trials and tribulations. They need a little bit more freedom of movement, it seems. And not to say that the MGs don't too, they do. But whereas MGs are more independent, projectors do like to mess with the fray, with the crowd, but definitely they like the one-on-one too, and they like their recognition, which can make it difficult for the other types who are more self-focused. I'm talking about the manifestors and the manifesting generators. And speaking of manifestors, I'm going to go ahead to the next chart, the last chart, and the example is going to be of a manifestor. I don't have any reflector examples because I haven't yet found any um, musical favorites of mine that are reflectors, but I'll keep looking. And then when I find them, I'll do a video just on them. But for now, imagine reflectors have no centers defined. It's all the centers are opened. They still have definition amongst the gates, the red and black colors, but they don't have any center definition. So this is the chart of Anik of an amazing metal band. They kind of started out like gothic rock style, and then over the years they became, I don't know what I would call them, maybe, God, I have no clue. Just really maybe doom rock a little, doom metal? No, I don't know. I don't know. I didn't look it up, but amazing band, amazing singer, ethereal voice, just incredible. And they have so many good albums, great lyrics. The Gathering was a favorite of mine for years. I would just get every album and listen to them. And really brilliant female singer. So the manifestor type, how we know it's a manifestor is again open sacral as well, and as I was saying, some kind of motor to the throat. So we got the solar plexus motor by the 35-36 channel of transitoriness going straight to the throat center. And this is a singer. She doesn't have the 8-1 as a lot of singers do, but she's got the 1. I'm sure someone in the band had the 8, but this is a singer who has the 35-36, can manifest, and powerful voice, powerful personality, powerful singer. And manifestor types, again, like the projectors with the open sacral, less energy, whereas the projectors can ride the crowd, ride the energy of their environment. Manifestors can too, but they can get real depleted if they're not careful. They really have to take care of themselves. Otherwise, they go from extremes to long periods of rest, to long periods of extreme activity. Um, Manifestors are very special in the sense that they're very, very talented, very intelligent. They're almost like, I don't know how to describe it. They're beings that come in with a certain level of power that makes everyone else uncomfortable. And so, out of all the types, they probably suffer the most in being able to accept themselves because what you have is, a world where they're kind of crippled by their parents on purpose, so as the parents can feel to control them because they can feel that the intense energy of manifestors and their capacity to manifest. That to a degree, it's almost like the parents will feel they need to be controlled. So this puts a real hamper on the life of manifestors, and they have to go through periods where they don't have to do anything but, come to terms with that, forgive and move forward and embrace their difference. You have a lot of manifestors that just try and pretend they're another generator when they're not. They're really not. They're almost like the pharaoh types of human design. No rules for them except inform and be informed almost. They were the leaders of old times, of ancient times. And so they still have that blueprint. And so in this case, we have Anik who's an emotional manifester. And with that definition of transitorious, like the life of a musician would have been perfect for her. She needs to move her body, she needs to move her energy, travel, do creative things, move about. That's the energy, the 35, 36. And I think I'll leave it at that. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask in the chat. I love to talk about the types. I've been studying human design since the early 2000s, and it's gotten to a point where I can recognize a type just by their voice, the cadence of the voice, or just by the energy when someone's present in front of me. It's just been years of really honing in that skill of being alert to the aura that's in front of me. And so it's real interesting. Sometimes I have to ask questions, but usually I can hear it in the tone of the voice. Very fascinating. So those of you on your exploration to human design, I give you this little intro, and I think that's it. Nothing else to add. I hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time.